Good morning. You guessed it. It's Mossdog again. Let's talk about deployment for a one-drop Ironjawz list. So, just like in my previous video talking about Big Wa and being low drop, some of the same basic principles apply to Ironjawz. Before you even put your army on the table, you want to know who is going to have the initiative in determining who gets to go first, how many casts does my opponent have, right? And what kinds of shenanigans can they get up to on turn one? Can they debuff me turn one? Can they shoot me turn one? Can they charge me turn one? Can they teleport and get into my backline turn one? And then based on that information, that gives you a little bit of an advantage in how you deploy. So for the sake of this video, we're going to assume that we have the advantage in who gets to go first, because this list of mine is a 2-drop list. I'm pretty sure it's a 2-drop list. What we're running is here. Let's have just a quick look here. We are running a Mega Boss on Makrusha with Destroyer. We are running 2 Weird Knob Shamans. One of them is the General. We are running 2 War Chanters. We are running 2 reinforced units of Gore-gruntas, a single 3 reinforced unit, or a single of 3 unit of Gore-gruntas, and a reinforced unit of Brutes. This is the list. 2 drops. Okay, so when you have the initiative of who gets to go first, the vast majority of the time, I'm going to say probably something like 80% of the time, you're going to opt to let your opponent go first. The reason is because you want them to move up the table so that they're closer to you. You want them to have to unpack their castle so that they might move and leave vulnerable things in their backline. And then when it's your turn, you get to, like, they're a little bit more spread out. They're a little bit closer to you. So when you do charge into them, it's going to be really fun. And it also means that the double turn is on you. I just read in my Discord. Here, let's give this guy a shout out here. This is Johnny Rage 89 in my Discord, who said that he recently played a game with Ironjawz against Daughters of Cain, and he just charged, and his opponent went first, and then he double turned, and that was the game. Now, while that isn't the most exciting game, and just as a little bit of a side note, if you're playing a casual game with friends and you double turn them, like at the beginning of turn 2, if you're double turning them and you know that if you go twice, you're just going to win the game, just don't. Just tell your friend, because this is your friend. Be like, hey man, do you think if I double turn you right now that the game ends? And if they're like, well, yeah, kind of, right? Like, yeah, it's definitely going to be really hard for me to come back. Then just tell them, be like, well, for the sake of a fun game, because ultimately that's why we're here, is for a fun game, I'm going to let you go. You can go. You can have the next turn. And then maybe, because you're here for fun. You're here for fun. However, if you're in a competitive environment, if you're playing at a GT, or if you're playing at a tournament, then take the double turn and win and the game, right? Because that's the difference between playing like a casual game with your friends that's just for fun and playing in a tournament, right? Also, in a tournament, you can't do that in a tournament also because it's not fair, right? Like in a competitive environment, everyone comes to the tournament with the understanding that everyone is going to do their best to win the game, right? No one is out there like trying to lose or making stupid choices on purpose. That's bad sportsmanship. Everyone's going to come. Everyone's going to play their best. Everyone is going to follow the rules. Good luck, have fun, shake hands. It's all good to go. You can tell your opponent things like, hey, like, that's a bummer, like, I know, like, I got really lucky or whatever. Like, you could say that and be like, yeah, like, I know it wasn't the most fun game, so thank you for being such a gracious opponent for me, and I really appreciate that, and I hope that your next game goes better. Like, you can say things like that, but in a competitive environment, you have to follow the rules. We rolled off, I won, I get to go, right? So keep that in mind too. Okay, so the only time that we're gonna opt to go first as a 2-drop Ironjawz list, or a 1-drop Ironjawz list for that matter, is if our opponent made a deployment mistake. If our opponent has done something where they've left something vulnerable, where you can get to it, because don't forget, in an Ironjawz list, we can get to pretty much everything. We can get to pretty much everything. We have Mighty Destroyers, we have Fasted, we have Teleports, and then if you checked out my Mega Boss movement video, there's even some like S tier level like tricks of how we can get into their backline and on all these like silly movement shenanigans that we can do. So if they've left something open, you can punish them for it. Taking away some of their key pieces before they get a chance to buff their units, reposition their units, is a good play, right? So if your opponent made a deployment mistake, you can capitalize on it and kind of get a huge advantage early. The other time that you would opt to go first is if you know that your opponent's army does not want to get pinned into their deployment zone. With an army like Ironjawz, we can take something like a unit of pigs, especially now that they have a 6-inch, or that we can have all the units in like a unit of Gorgrunches in a straight line. If we put them in a position like this, and our opponent is unable to come out of their deployment zone, we can just kind of take the map with the rest of our units and not have to worry too much about, like, they're going to double turn us, but even if they do get the opportunity to double turn, it's going to take them a lot of effort and resources and energy to break out of the deployment zone. So those are really the only two times I feel like you want to opt to go first, is if your opponent made a deployment mistake, or if you really think that pinning them into their deployment zone is going to work out for you. When I was playing at the GT, I played against a Lumineth player, a very good player, but he said before the game that he had never played against my army and he didn't really know what it did. So, I gave him kind of the rundown, but it's one thing to get an info dump at the beginning of a competitive game, and it's another thing to actually see it in action. So he was playing Lumineth, and so what he did was he deployed like his sentinels and his heroes and his faction terrain in one of the corners, and then across the rest of the board all the way at the back he put his, I can't remember what they're called, but they're like those little archers that ride on those gazelle type deals, right? And he had like 4 units of 5 or something, and he lined them up all as deep in his deployment zone as he possibly could, as far away from me as possible. And so I just put my Mega Boss on the opposite side of his castle, and I turn 1 Alpha struck him. On turn 1, I charged in. Oh, geez. On turn 1, I charged in, and I smashed into his castle with my Maw Crusher, and I really made it very difficult for him to come back. So there are opportunities. Like I said, if your opponent makes a deployment mistake, which my opponent in that game did make a deployment mistake, but it was from just a lack of experience, right? It's because my opponent didn't really know what my army did. So, he's a good player, no fault to him, right? Just, you live and learn, right? And if you want to pin your opponent into their deployment zone, those are really the only 2 times that you want to be doing that. So some other things to really consider are, I think that's pretty much it. Deploying when you're low drops is relatively straightforward. You have to think about like where you want your casters, because you want them to be either within 30 or outside of 30, depending on what your opponent is doing, right? And then after that, in this case, I think in this army, I have Hoarfrost and I have Hand of Gorg. Those are the kind of the 2 go-to spells that I have for my two weird knobs here, right? And then after that, we just have like the 12/15 inches for the War Chanters, right? For fix and beat and get 'em beat. And our Mega Boss. So you have to kind of think to yourself, like, well, what am I Hoarfrosting and teleporting turn 1? Because I don't know how you play Ironjawz, but if in either Big Wa or Ironjawz, what I really want to do, oh my lord, sometimes I wish TTS wasn't so janky, but what I'm doing with my Ironjawz units in Big Wa and in Ironjawz is I'm Hoarfrosting and teleporting a unit of Gorgrunches pretty much every turn. That's kind of my go-to plan here. So, and then my Maw Crusher sits in the back and sits within range of everybody, so that I can have a nice, easy time giving commands to the rest of the army and tripling all my commands. So, On turn 1, normally it's going to be like a unit of 6 pigs that are being buffed, right? So let me see here. So all I need to make sure is that my units are in this in the center of this Venn diagram, the ones that I'm interested in buffing and sending in early. So I can actually, maybe I should put my Word Chanters further in the back. I'm going to put my Weird Knobs all the way in the back just to make sure that I'm able to get my spells off. And just for turn 1, you know, because if I want a magical dominance turn 1, this is a pretty good way of making sure that actually happens, right? Is just being like really far back. Because, yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter, but, you know, if you're 30 inches away, there's nothing that, like, if I deploy with my wizards in the far back, there's nothing that my opponent is going to be able to do to stop me from getting my spells off, right? It's just up to me to like fail my rolls. So yeah, I mean, there we go. And then my brutes can kind of sit in the back because normally my brutes are going to be either my turn 1 or my turn 2 teleport target. We could probably actually throw them because brutes are slow. I'm not sure if you knew that, but brutes are slow. So yeah, I mean, this is a fairly decent deployment here. I know it's kind of hard to see because I don't have them colored, so let me just throw like a red on these guys and a blue on these guys so we can easily see them. So here, you know, here's a kind of a deployment for Ironjawz. We have this unit of red pigs that's in the center, so this unit of pigs is going to be hoarfrosted and teleported. Over here, this unit of Gorgruntas is just going to grab this objective right here, and then this unit of Gorgruntas is going to grab this objective over here and kind of start running up the flank here, and then the brutes are going to be set up for the next turn to be teleported out. Brutes in this Ironjawz list, I like this reinforced unit of brutes. Reinforced unit of brutes is solid. They're also very, very good at taking objectives. They need less support than the rest of the army. Gorgruntas need a lot more support. Gorgruntas need that Violent Fury. It's going to double how much damage they deal. And they also, they need the Violent Fury, and they benefit insanely from Hoarfrost on the tusks and hooves. If you get Hoarfrost off, the damage output of your pigs is going to go up. Even with 1 extra rend on tusks and hooves, it increases the damage by a lot. I actually have it here in front of me. Let's see. The only time, and so because the brutes have good rend, they get all-out attack for free if they're fighting something big, and they're good at taking objectives away from 1 wound dudes, right? Yeah, let's see. Where's my Gorgruntas? Oh, maybe I don't have it here. Oh, never mind. So the brutes are good to function sort of independently. They don't need buffs, but I do like to teleport them just because they're so bloody slow, so I can get them up onto an objective pretty early. So in this case, you know, it's like the brutes might very well take the center of the battlefield here, right? So it's like turn 1, these guys are getting buffed and they're being sent in. So let's just say whatever, they're being sent in over on this flank over here. Let's just drop them here and see what happens. Kaboom! That's fun. So they're going to be placed over here. Now let's probably lose them through the floor if I do that. Right? So they're going to get buffed up and attack over here. Cool. Or they could charge right up the center too. Right? Like I could Hoarfrost, depending on what my opponent does, I could Hoarfrost this unit of Gruntas, and then I could teleport the unit of brutes over to the side. And then that just means that maybe these guys don't move too far up. Maybe these guys only move up and tag this objective. And then my, like if I'm going to go like this, these brutes get teleported over here, let's say. These guys just get Hoarfrosted and charge up the middle of the map. That's cool. And then the Mega Boss is going to move so that he is within range to give his commands to all the units here. That's another thing too. When I play with a Maw Crusher, and I do this with Gobsprak as well, but I find it's less important. I actually have like another base that's the same size, and when I'm thinking and planning about where I want things to move, I will actually take that base and I will, because my Mega Boss might often be one of the last things that I move, kind of depending because it's so big. So, but I definitely want to make sure that I have enough room for it. So I'll take like this other base and I'll stick it on the battlefield, and I'll be like, okay, here's where I want my Mega Boss to end up, and I'll measure, make sure everything's okay, good. And then from there, when I move my other units around, I can measure and be like, okay, so, you know, the brutes are within 18 inches, so I can redeploy ×3 I can whatever ×3, because I tend not to commit my Mega Boss or my Maw Crusher early. I tend to keep him in the back as a threat to my opponent. It's like, hey, guess what? If you are going to leave any holes anywhere, I'm going to get you. Or if I send a unit of pigs in and they get destroyed, then my Mega Boss is there to kind of follow up and fill in whatever kind of holes. And then my little 3 unit of pigs, they're good for whatever, right? They're good for whatever I need them to be. They can zone out the back line if my opponent has some teleporting, right? Like I can sort of trail these guys back like this and make sure that I'm zoned out. Or these guys can sit someplace like this and, you know, just kind of zone out my back line. All that's good and fine. Whatever I need them to be. And then let's see. And then, yeah, I mean, you also have to think about where you're going to move your... So, weird knobs are going to run normally 6... Like, they're going to run, right? Because they're not doing much charging. So you can see here that if this guy moves up 6 inches, then my pigs are no longer within range. So it's the same kind of idea too, right? Like when you're positioning your units and moving them forward, you just have to make sure that everything is going to be within the ranges of the buffs that are going to come after it. Right, so let's go 6 inches, and that'll be a big decision about who you run, right? So like this guy can get up here and get within range, but this guy can't. So if I auto run him and he gets to move an additional 5 inches, right? So you can see, like, I can be like, okay, well, he's actually going to move up to here, which means the Mega Boss has to move a little bit further, has to be a little bit further back, right? And then this pig's got to be a little bit further back. Cool. So now this unit of pigs is within range of both of my abilities again. Running the guys in the back is often a pretty good strategy because it just means that, like, they're slow, right? These little foot heroes are slow, and everything else in the army is fast. So you can teleport brutes. I've also had luck before, like, teleporting up one of the support units, especially the get 'em beat guy. Because if my opponent decided that he wants to sit far back and I want to get him, then I can teleport up a War Chanter. And, like, I can do it aggressively too, right? Because, you know, and because I have 2 of them, so I can teleport them up into a position like this, and then I can use get 'em beat on these guys, and then bam, they're going in too. So that's really all you have to think about, which is why when you're playing an Ironjawz game, it's good to, after deployment and all that, but in the first turn you have to think, like, what am I Hoarfrosting and teleporting turn 1? What am I Hoarfrosting and teleporting turn 2? And then what do I need to do to make sure that that happens? Where do my units have to be? And specifically, who's going to get the run? Who's going to get the auto 6 run? That's going to be a big thing. And who's going to get the teleport? Right? I mean, when it really comes... Like, most of these games are won and lost within the first, like, 20 minutes. First turn. It's so important. Deployment is so important. And then how you position and move yourself on turn 1 is also incredibly important. So you can see here, this is looking pretty good, right? This is looking pretty good. Although I can't teleport both my War Chanter and my Brutes. So I don't know, maybe my Brutes are going to be my turn 2, so instead I just slide them over here. So now I'm ready for turn 2. I'm ready to teleport them turn 2. I'm ready to re-Hoarfrost something in the front, and I'm ready to teleport my Brutes turn 2. Looking pretty good. Yeah. The real struggle with Ironjawz is running out of momentum early. People will overcommit, and then they will lose momentum, which is another reason why I like to keep my Mega Boss kind of in reserve. I think people undervalue the psychological impact that certain units have on the table. That is something that I learned playing Stormcast Eternals. Sometimes it's better to keep the units in reserve instead of putting them on the table, because then your opponent is always like, well, if I do this, then they're going to teleport them back here, right? They're going to, like, Thunderstrike them in back here. So I got to reposition to move them over this way and that way and everything else. So, yeah, and when you're playing this game, during deployment and during your first move, you have to have a holistic approach to the army. to what your overall plan is for that turn. So at the very start of my turn, before I do anything, once it's my turn, I will remove all my little tokens and markers that are indicating which units are getting which buffs, right? Because all those buffs go away. And then after that, I think to myself, okay, like, how do I get a 5-point turn? Okay, well, I get a 5-point turn. I need to take this objective, and I really want to kill that unit. And so what does it look like if that's what I'm trying to do? And then I kind of think backwards from there. Here's how I get my 5-point turn. So what needs to happen? So then what spells need to be cast on which units? And then at the very end, I'm thinking, well, if this is what I'm going to be doing anyway, then what's the grand strategy that goes along with it? Because maybe these pigs are the ones that get the run because I want to get Surround and Destroy. Right? Maybe these pigs are running, and maybe these brutes are the ones being teleported. If I'm trying to get Surround and Destroy, perhaps I want to send my brutes over here, and I want to get them set up for the next turn. And then maybe, I'm not even sure if the Mega Boss can sit all the way in the back. I think he can. Can he sit within 6 inches of the edge of the battlefield? I guess there's a very easy way to tell if I just throw him here in this corner. It looks like yes. It looks like yes. Maybe not. I don't know, it's pretty tight, but you kind of get my point, right? Maybe this weird knob has to sit closer in the back. And then again, that changes where the positioning of the rest of the units are going. So you have to think about the whole turn and then work your way from the big picture of what you're trying to accomplish down to the individual details. And then also thinking one turn ahead just about what wants to get buffed. There's nothing worse than starting your turn and being like, well, I'd love to teleport this unit somewhere, but I can't, right? And then you also have to be careful about, staying outside of 30 of your opponent's wizards and all those things too. So anyway, I hope this video was helpful. I'm planning on doing more just like this. So it's hard for me to know if this is valuable information or not. So be sure to join the Discord. Be sure to drop a thanks to the patrons, like, subscribe, and wah.